The first thing I'd like to have you do is just tell me your name, when you were born, and where you were born.
And where? You want me to tell you now, is that right?
Uh-huh.
My name is Frank Busnardo. I was born in Pedroni, Colorado, which is about a town about 10 miles east of Sterling, Colorado. And that was on February 13, 1920.
Well, did you grow up then in Colorado?
I did up to 2 years of age. My parents decided to go back to Italy. So in the meantime, there was a sister of mine that had born before me, and one more sister that was behind me. So in 1922, we went to Italy because my dad wanted to introduce his wife, who was raised and born in this country, to his parents and the family. And naturally wanted to introduce the children. And that was 1922. We were there. I went through all my elementary school and high school and started college. I was studying to be a teacher. And at that time, I was about 18 years old. And things in Europe wasn't too good for the war coming up. So since my mother was an American citizen, but she lost her citizenship when she married my dad before 1922, she lost her citizenship. So there was no way that she could return to the United States. She had 9 sisters here, and her mother was still living in this country. So when the war got a little bit rougher with Hitler in Europe, my dad could see there was a war coming up. And he said, since you and your 2 sisters were born in the United States, you should be able to go back to America, and we have to stay here and wait to see what's going to happen. And maybe once you get there, you could probably call us to come over there, which the law would have made perfect. Well, about October of 1938, only my younger sister and I had decided to come to this country. And we went to an aunt who was my mother's sister that lived in Bridgeport, Nebraska. And there we stayed there until about Christmas time. At Christmas time, we came to Denver. That's where my grandmother, my mother's mother, was living here, and 3 of her sisters were living here. So that's what we did. We came here in Denver in December, just before Christmas of 1938. I decided to stay in Denver, and so did my sister. So we stayed over here. We didn't go back to the farm in Nebraska or anything. And it was rough. No one couldn't speak English, neither one of us. So one of my aunts just had a baby, so she took my sister over to her house to take care of her and the baby, new baby. And I stayed with an uncle and an aunt that they were also my mother's sister and brother-in-law, and stayed there and looking for a job. So since I couldn't speak English, they sent me to the opportunity school in Denver to learn English and to whatever else I could get over there. While I was over there, I started going every night to the school over there. There, my English didn't come back to me until about February. About the 15th of February, I began to speak a little English. I thought that maybe there was a lot of help that I got, but I had taken 6 years of Latin and 4 years of French in Italy when I was going to school. So I think it probably helped me a lot to learn the language pretty good. And I did. And then I started working in different places where I could get a job. I went downtown on Court Street, cleaning, a busboy, cleaning tables and washing the dishes and stuff like that to get my meals. After that, it was rough. I was smoking, so I had to buy a cigarette. Good thing cigarettes were not a high price on those days. And one day, I was looking on a paper with my aunt, and we saw an ad on the paper that a laundry was looking for somebody to work in there 6 days a week. So, and the man said, it has to be a strong man. That's what the ad said. Well, 18 years old, you feel like you're pretty strong. I'm 19 almost. By that time, I was by 19. And I went, my uncle took me over there to introduce me to the owner. Happened to be an Italian fellow. It was the laundry on 29th and Zunai. I'm trying to think of the name of what that laundry was now. My memory is beginning to slip. Anyway, he hired me right away. I didn't ask him how much money. My uncle didn't ask him how much money. He just said, got a job. And he says he could take the streetcar to come to work, but somebody would have to take him home at night. And he says, don't worry about it. I'm the boss. I'm Italian. I like to help him out. I will take him home myself. So I used to live on 43rd and Xavier. The laundry was on 29th and Zunai. So I'll take the bus, the streetcar in those days, and go to work at 7 o'clock in the morning. And my aunt helped me prepare me a lunch. 5 o'clock came, I'm still working there. 6 o'clock, still working there. And he said, let's go down. I'm going to take you down here to the drive-in and we'll have something to eat. I said, okay. So we went over there and got something to eat and went back to work. He was going to work a long time. So anyway, we only worked until about 8 o'clock that night. And then he took me home. The next morning he came back, started doing that. Anyway, to make a long story short now, I worked a whole week. On Saturday morning, I went to work because we were supposed to work 4 hours on Saturday morning on those days. I worked 4 hours. At noon he gave me a little envelope, a little brown envelope, and I took it. I had to, at that time I had to learn how to get the streetcar to go back home. And I went home on a streetcar, and on my way back I opened the envelope and looked into what was in it. There was $8. $8, I said to myself. That's not too much money, to work. Because when I counted that I worked 80 hours that week. 10 cents an hour. Anyway, that wasn't too good. But job was scarce, and I kept on working there. And in the meantime, I went to church one Sunday morning, and my uncle introduced me to another Italian fellow who owned a Boilermaker shop in town. And we were talking about it, and he found out that I was making 10 cents an hour, working 8 hours a week. He says, and that's no good. He says, I'll talk to my partner, maybe we can get you to work with us. That's what I did. And within, I didn't even give the other fellow any time. I just quit, period. And they told me right away off from the beginning, you're going to make 40 cents an hour, 40 hours a week. That's all. I said, that's good. And that's what I did. So for 3 years, I worked for that company, became a Boilermaker apprentice, and served real good, learned a trade real good. On those days, you didn't have to be a specialist. A Boilermaker, you did the reading of the blueprints, you design it, you lay it out on your steel, you welded it, you cut it, you punch it, whatever had to be done. One man could do all of that on those days. It's not like today that you got to be a union for this, a union for that. But anyway, that was good. It was good for me. I enjoyed it because I learned how to weld. I learned a lot of things. And I still went to opportunity school to learn drawing, which helped me a lot for that too. So anyway, I was there for 3 years. In the meantime, the war broke out in Europe. And I always loved to be a pilot. That's sort of my youth, in my youth days, I always thought about it. I like to be a pilot. So one day I went down to the recruiting service, and I told a fellow there, I says, I like to go to school someplace where I can become a pilot, because I want to be a pilot. He says, oh yeah, he said, you can do that. No problem. He said, but how's your schooling system? I said, well, in the meantime, I had checked with Denver University, and I gave them all my credits, and they said, you are credited with 1 year of college. So I had 1 year of college, and he said, it should be enough to become a pilot. I said, okay. So I signed up, went to Fort Logan, and the next thing he was telling me, he said I was going in the Navy. I said, no, I said, not the Navy. I want Air Force. Oh, no, he said, we don't need anybody in the Air Force right now. I said, okay, forget me. So I left. I resigned. I didn't sign up any paper or vow to anybody. And I went back to work with the Boilermaker place without any problem. But then in 1941, I found out that on the newspaper there was a lot of ads that in California the shipyards were asking for Boilermakers, and they were paying $1 and a penny an hour, and I was making 60 cents an hour at that time. So I told the boss, I said, I might have to quit you because I said, the 60 cents an hour, things were getting a little bit better in those days. You needed more money. I was paying my aunt some money to live there with her. And I decided to go to California, and the one that was asking the shipyards, that was asking for it mostly was in Los Angeles. The one boss wouldn't let me go. He said that he said, we took you over here and you were nothing. And he says, and now because he says, you want to get rich. He says, and you learn a trade right over here, you're doing some good for us now, and you want to leave us. Well, that was his partner. The other partner, he says to me one day, I met him again in church one Sunday, and he says, he said, Frank, he said, the First World War, I went to San Francisco to work in the shipyards. The same deal like you are now, because I wasn't making enough money over here. So I went over there and then made my money. I said, well, anyway, I'm going to give you guys a week. And then I said, after that, I have to go. So that's what I did. I gave them 1 week's time, and I told them that I'm leaving no matter what. So the boss was mad, and he wouldn't even give me nothing, a recommendation. What I did, what kind of a man I was, nothing. But then his partner, who became a good friend of my uncle and my family, I didn't have a family myself. And he's got me a nice little note, recommendation of what I was able to do. So I had a 1936 Plymouth that I had bought in the meantime. I decided to drive to Los Angeles, and that's what I did. And I went to Los Angeles and went to the shipyards there, and had to take it. Well, the only thing, they wouldn't hire a Boilermaker. They said that you have to stick around. Since you're a welder too, you do some welding now. You watch the bulletin board. Whenever they call for Boilermaker, then you can transfer. I said, okay. So I took my test, the Navy test. You had to take a Navy test because this was all strictly government now, And I passed it. And he says, now tomorrow, he says, you go to the union office, sign up the union, and then buy all the equipment that you need. You need a leather jacket for welding, gloves, a hood, all that stuff. So I did all of that. In the meantime, Los Angeles, that day, the fog came on that night. I slept in my car. I woke up the next morning. I didn't know where I was at because the fog was so thick out there, I couldn't see where I was going or anything. So I stayed there until I looked at the time, it was about 10 o'clock finally, the sun came out. I said, now I guess I gotta go look for what they told me to do. I got to thinking about it, well, maybe I will, maybe I won't. I had a good friend of mine that lived in San Francisco that him and I went to school in Italy together. And I knew he was doing good in San Francisco. And I used to ride with him all the time. I decided I'm going to go to San Francisco, to heck with Los Angeles. And sure enough, I left and I went to San Francisco, went to his address, and the landlady, she says, he's working. I said, can you tell me where he's working? She told me where he was at. I drove downtown on a restaurant. He was a waiter in one of the big restaurants in town. I went over there. I sat on a counter. He's working behind the counter. I could recognize him right away. He never looked at me. He just came by there, brought me a glass of water, and came back. Pretty soon he came back and said, can I help you? I said, no, I don't want to eat nothing here. He said, you are. No, you are. When did you get here? He wanted to, he was all excited. That was very good. So then I told him what I was looking for. I'm looking for a job. And he says, okay. I got a man that comes here every morning for breakfast. And he said he is the, what do they call him when they hire people for a company?
I don't know.
He's the guy that does all the hiring for the shipyards. Because I told him that I had taken the test about the, in Los Angeles and everything. And so he said, tomorrow morning, he said, you come back over here. And I said, well, I ain't got no place to sleep tonight. Oh, he said, you come to my house, to my restaurant. Not restaurant, apartment. He had an apartment. So I slept there with him that night. The next morning, we went to work together. And sure enough, here comes the guy from the shipyards, South San Francisco shipyards. And he introduced me to him and told him I was looking for a job. He says, come down there. He says, we can sign you in. I said, that's a Boilermaker? He said, I think so. He said, I think so. So went over there the next morning, the same morning, and he started looking at all the different places where they could have used me as a Boilermaker. He says, no Boilermaker, but he said, we're in very, very dire need of welder. I says, I guess I'll have to be the welder again. And so I even had the United States test in my pocket that they gave me down at the thing. And I gave it to him and I showed it to him. I'm qualified welder. He says, okay, then fine. You started at $1.06 an hour. But he says, I had to put you on swing shift. 3 o'clock in the afternoon until 11 o'clock at night. See, you get your 8 hours. Anyway, I ended up working there, and I went daytime later. But then the first 2 or 3 months, I was doing so good on welding that they made me an inspector. As an inspector, that's all I had to do, just sit with the boss or the group all day, all night, you know what I mean? And then go out and inspect the stuff about an hour before we quit. Otherwise, there was nothing to do. So women were beginning to get hired as welder, but none of them knew how to do any welding. So I became instructor and inspector. I go 3 hours to help the women learn how to weld, and the rest of the time for my job. And that worked out pretty good. So here we are, and this is 1941. And this is 1941. The war was going on in Europe, strong. Already Pearl Harbor was already going. No, Pearl Harbor wasn't going yet.
Did you have any contact with your family in Italy at this point?
For at the beginning, I was able to communicate with mail, and then the mail didn't even couldn't communicate anymore. So the only way I could communicate with my family throughout the whole war after that was through the Red Cross, and the Red Cross was doing that for me all the time. Oh yeah.
Were you able to follow what was going on there? Did you
Well,
know much about what was happening with your...
You couldn't get too much out of it because sometime a letter that was coming back from my folks, half of the lines was blacked out. So I know that they were saying something that it was supposed to be maybe secret or something, you know what I mean?
At least you knew they were all right.
Oh yeah, all right, yeah. And like I says, after the war and everything, my dad died in March of 45, so it was just before the war ended, you know what I mean? But by that time, we were getting a little bit better off again.
What part of Italy were they in?
It was more of a tourist town between Venice and the Alps. It's called Bassano del Grappa. And that's where I took all my education and everything, you know. Oh, yeah.
So this was a part of Italy that the Germans had occupied throughout the war.
Well, you talk about that too. That's something else that I probably I don't like to even mention that part. The German in that town, one morning, they picked up a whole bunch of partisans, they call them, partisans. Kids, young people, they wanted to fight the Germans. And, you know, by that time, the Italian was against the German. But from the time that the German got to Rome, from then on, the German were hated, all northern Italy. So they had these partisans they used to try to catch, because a lot of the traffic of the German was going right through northern Italy to go to Austria and Germany. So all these young people was all over these mountains, which was the Alps, and they would shoot them, stop them, you know. But then one day, what they did, without letting them know, they went ahead and caught them all. And one morning, my dad was getting out of his house, going to town on the main line, an avenue that goes into the downtown town that he was in. And there was a truck, a flatbed truck, a whole bunch of boys standing inside there, and they were stopping at every one of the trees alongside of the fence and hang them. And one of them was a first cousin of mine. And my dad saw all of that morning. I got to know it later on from him, you know what I mean? I'm not from him, but from my family. But that's what the German did. They hung a whole avenue, about 30 trees in one place, and another 20 trees in another trees, and hung all these young boys, all anywhere from 17 to 25 years of age. That was a bad deal. That was a bad deal. And then we know it for a fact. I mean, I even read a book. I don't have it with me anymore because I don't know what happened to it. The whole history about what the German did in Italy and northern part of Italy especially. Sometimes they just burn a whole town down. They burn it down. I mean, completely. Killed mother, children, old people, young people. Everybody was around. It was terrible.
We had the situation where the Japanese on the west coast were herded into camps, and Italians didn't face the same kind of treatment, but I've heard stories that there was some, and did you face any?
I personally didn't, because I was an American citizen. You see what I mean? Yeah, I had a lot of friends of mine that were from Italy, never got a citizenship, served with the Italian army. They were older people. And they just picked them up like they did the Japanese and put them in these detainment, I guess call them prison or camps or whatever you call them. And in fact, one guy, I never forget, I still got it. He had a little radio about this big. He had just bought it. He said, Frank, he said, we're supposed to turn all these things in because it's got short wave in it. It wasn't short wave, and you know what I mean? It had a little switch that you could turn. You could get some of the police reports, you know, how they announce them, you know. And they called that shortwave, so they were going to take it away from him. And he said, Frank, I'll give it to you. Don't try to give me nothing. I still got that radio. I still got it in the basement. I still got it now. You know what I mean? I felt so bad when he told me that. But then they didn't get treated as bad as the Japanese. Yeah, and when I was you know, that came back now talking about the prisoners. When I was living in San Francisco, in Alameda, they had a prisoners of war camp, Italian people there. And one Sunday, it was I forget what day it was announced that people could go visit these prisoners on a Sunday morning, from a certain hour to a certain hour. Spend some time with them and all that. So I did. I went down to see him and kept talking. And says, by the way, is anybody from Busnardo? That's the town I came from. And somebody, yeah, I think I heard somebody over there. Sure enough, he found one guy. His father was selling birds that he was killing or raising in the piazza, in a place in downtown, in the middle of the city. His father, that was it. That's how I found out. I talked to him nice, you know what I mean? He got caught in Africa, by the United States. He was caught as a prisoner, and that's what he was at in Alameda. So I think it was about 2 months after I was there, 3 months after I was there, I got a notice from my draft board in Denver. They wanted me to come in Denver to take my exam to be drafted in the service. So I called them on the phone, and I told them that I'm here right now. I have to have some time. Why don't you do this? I said, transfer me to the San Francisco and see what happened. I said, if they will accept me here, this way I said I could take my test and everything. If I pass, fine. If I don't pass, at least I won't lose my job. They said, okay. So they did, they transferred me over there. So I told the boss, I said they want me in. He said, don't worry about it, you're not gonna win in the service yet. He said, we need you here too bad. So I ended up getting about 4 or 5 deferments, 6 months at a time. But in the meantime, I came back to Denver just on a trip. I first got engaged with my wife. That I had the girl in Denver already before I left. I came back and got engaged. Came back later on and married her, and then took her back to San Francisco. And 9 months later, we had a baby. There was a lot of Marines, sailors, Army men in San Francisco in those days, a lot of them. Every time I went out in civilian clothes with my wife, or even by myself, some of these guys said, oh, there goes a 4F'er. There goes a war dodger. I used to get that kind of a name, it kind of burned me up in a way. And one day I got up in the morning, I got the newspaper, and it says, nobody, no matter what they're working on, no matter who they're working for, the government or anything, if they're under 24 years, over 24 years of age, has to go in the service. So I didn't say nothing to the boss, I didn't say nothing to nobody. About a week later, I gave my notice that I was ready to, my 6 months was up again. I didn't tell the boss nothing. I told my wife, I said, I think I better go. I don't want to hear this mess up, which I did. And that's what I did. I refused to go and work continuously. I'm making good money and everything. I was a welder inspector, I was making extra money and everything. I said, no way. I said, I'm going to take this noise. Plus, I said, I'm an American citizen. I think my duty is to go and serve in a war too. And that's what I did. I went to the draft board in San Francisco. I said, will you please take me in there and give me all my specifications that I have and everything. So I got the whole physical, a whole day, passed it, fine. I said, now I want to take my wife back to Denver with her family, and I want to transfer me back to Denver. So this was about June, about June in 1941, 1944, 45, 44, that's what it was, June of 44. I sold my furniture that I had bought in San Francisco, and I sold my car to somebody. Best part of it is, that car, I couldn't get no parts for it on my gear, low gear. So in San Francisco, you got a lot of hills over there. And the only way I could get up a hill was make a U-turn and back up the hill. So after the first or the second time I did that, a policeman stopped me. He got me, He was going to give me a ticket and all that. And I said, well, I'll tell you what. I said, if you could get this car fixed, I said, on a low gear, I said, I'll be glad to do it. I'm glad to pay for it. But he said, I'm not going to do it, he says. I said, what, you find me the parts then? One way or the other one, let me know. He said, I'll tell you what you do. He said, you continue to do this, but be sure there's not too much traffic and that you are safe and you're not hurting anybody. So every hill that I got, you turn and up. And on top of that, I lived on a hill where my apartment was. I had to do the same thing. But anyway, I sold the car, sold everything I had. My wife and I got on a train and came back to Denver. And I called the draft board of here in Denver. I told them, I'm here now. Anytime you want me, just get me in. So I think about a week later, they called me. I went and took the test. I passed out 100%, no problem of any kind, you know. And I said, good enough. So I think it was July 1944. And I got brought down here in Fort Morgan. See how I mean? Fort Logan, and we were there for about a week. And from there, we got on a train, didn't know where we were going, didn't tell us where we were going. I ended up in Tyler, Texas. Yeah. Tyler, Texas was a camp called Camp Fanning, Texas. Army base, that's all Army. And I ended up doing my boot camp there for 14 weeks as an Army man. Everything was fine. I was doing good on everything. I got my medal that says that I was a sharpshooter, all of that, you know, real good. No problem with any kind. I finished that. My unit was being called to go in Europe. And my name was not listed on that group. And then it says, report to this office, whatever office it was, and M1, military intelligence. Well, I got to thinking maybe because of my language, Italian language and all that, and I said maybe they're going to use me as an interpreter or something. And that's what I did. When I reported on that, instead, they were going to try to make a parachutist out of me. Why, I don't have no idea. But with the military intelligence, I got to also later on thinking about it. So you start jumping up and down, you drop off a little higher, tower, high on concrete. You keep dropping down like that, you know, without nothing. Well, first, I ended up on my left foot, and I cracked my arch on my left one. So for a whole week, I was in the hospital taking care of that. So then they gave me, what do they call them? Those things you put inside of the foot. Anyway, back again to the same thing, start dropping. But naturally now, I'm worried about this, so I'm using this foot more to land. Well, that cracks too. It was not a broken, just a hairline crack underneath the arch. It was hurting naturally. So they said, I'm sorry, we can't use you as a parachutist. I said, okay. And then I asked him, I said, one of the sergeant, I said, what was the reason why they wanted me to be a parachutist for? He said, well, I think, he said, because I see your record, he said, I see where you were raised in Italy, you knew the country, you knew the dialects and all that. The war is in Italy, going up north. He says, they probably want to drop you behind the line. He said that's probably what they were trying to do, get you so they could drop you behind the line. I said, well, it would have been good because then I would have seen all my families again. But then that didn't work out anyway. So the next thing I knew, my name is on a bulletin board, be ready, turn in my rifle and everything else, and get ready to be shipped someplace, get ready to go on the bus. And I ended up in Camp Livingston, Louisiana. And there, I went in a group of people there, training as a military policeman. So I went through that for about 2 weeks and ended up to be a military policeman, I guess. And I was going with a lieutenant downtown with him to see how many drunks we could find and all that. But then one day, my name was back on a bulletin board, be ready to be shipped again. I didn't know where I was going either. I ended up in Houma, Louisiana. And we went to a camp. It was a prisoners of war camp of German soldiers. And that's what I ended up to be doing, watching the German prisoners of war, taking them out every day to work details, which went to, someday it went to a Blimp Air Force Base or maybe some of the big farms where they were raising sugar cane. So back and forth to that. So every day now, this was about October or November, I think it was, in 1944. Yeah, that's what it was. And I ended up until the war ended doing that. Both wars ended. I forgot, we dropped off about Japanese. Didn't make any difference anyway. Now the German prisoners that I had, that I was watching when I was in Louisiana, there was each group, it was about a 30-member group that you used to take them out to work. And there's always one or two that speak English. So you were able to communicate with them. And you know, I never will forget, we used to take them out in the morning about 8 o'clock in the morning, bring them back in about 1, 2, or 3 o'clock. Whatever they finished their job, you took them in. And what I used to do, this was in the summertime, so I used to go underneath a tree with my carbine and sit down and watch them working on a plantation, you know. And they were either hoeing or trimming or something, whatever they were doing. And once in a while I count them to make sure that they were all there, you know. A couple of times I fell asleep with a gun in my hand like this. And one of the prisoners speak English, he came over there, he said, I said, what? You know, Captain. He saw the captain coming with the car. He woke me up and told me that the captain was coming. And another time, a case happened, I'll talk about the prisoners of war again. This one guy, he was of German descent. And he didn't like the German, naturally, you know, very bad. He hated them, I guess, pretty bad. So one day, one of them, he was in an open field there. He didn't want to take his pants down to crap, you know what I mean, to move his bowels. He decided he was going to walk in a shady spot. So he hollered at him, stop. He stopped. He said 3 times, he shot a gun in the air. He didn't shoot him. And so naturally the guy got scared when he heard the shot. And he came back and he said he had to go. But anyway, then everything was fine. That night, the captain of the camp said, why didn't you shoot to kill like you were told to do? You said anytime they don't listen to you, you shoot to kill. Now you pay $5 for that bullet that you wasted. This happened right in this country. And, you know, I mean, I'm just telling you, actually, they come to me as we go along, these things sometimes, you know. So, but that's a fact. And there was something else that was nice with those. The prisoners of war, they used to always, on those fields, they used to find snakes. I mean, big one, 7, 8, 10 foot long snakes sometimes. And they would jump and get them and kill them, take the snake back to the camp, and then take the skin out and make different things. You know, I still got a billfold that they made. One made it for me. A billfold, you know, just a folding billfold like that, with the skin of a snake. Yeah. Oh yeah. And then there was one guy, especially that was Italian. I mean, he would speak Italian real good. So he used to be a good friend of mine. If I didn't like what they sent with us out to eat, I used to trade with him. I said, what do you got? He said, well, I got this here. So he might have had ham. And I had maybe bologna or something. I said, I'll trade with you. He traded with me. Oh, no. They didn't give me no trouble at all, the Germans. Nothing. They listened, they did their work, take them out. The sooner they got through working, they had a certain job to do. The sooner they get through with it, we go back to camp. So the earlier they go back to camp, that's what they used to love to do, to go back to camp. And they used to get their work done. They got paid 80 cents a day for working. Oh, yeah. They all got paid 80 cents a day for working. I had an uncle in Sterling, Colorado. They had a farm. And when I came back after the war and everything, he was telling me that he had 2 or 3 Italian people that was prisoners, you know, working on a farm for him. Oh yeah. And in fact, when they asked me what I wanted to do, when I got out of doing the MI, that they sent me down. That when they sent me down to making the military policeman, they asked me, "What would you like to have if they send you to a camp of prisoners of war?" I says, "Well, I would like to go to one of the Italian camps if they have any in this." Oh yeah, he said, "We got several. There's one in Utah. Forget what he told me different places, you know." I said, "That'll be fine." Well, they sent me to Louisiana with the German. That's the army for you.
That doesn't change either.
I mean, it's a laughing matter when you think about it, you know.
You mentioned going down to places like Texas and Louisiana. Was that a real culture shock from where you'd been and how you'd grown up to see those kind of places? And how
Well-
how did people react to you if they knew that you had grown up in Italy at that point?
Well, I didn't have no problem with anybody actually, because I've always did my duty, whatever had to be done. You know what I mean? And the only thing that I was surprised was in Louisiana at that time how the black people were treated. I was not used to it here over here. In Denver, we didn't have that kind of a problem, but over there, I had to walk out of the sidewalk. If you're walking down there, if you go to the toilet, you got black, white. You go to the bus, the black guy on the back end of the bus. I mean, that's how bad it was at the time that I was there. You know what I mean? And I saw what kind of a living they were making, these black. They were all in this plantation. They had a shack probably about, I would say 20 by 20. There was family, 10, 15, all sleeping, eating, and everything in the same place. Just a small roof over their head, and that's all it was. I mean, one after another one like that on this plantation. Like I said, I was shocked to see the treatment the blacks were getting at the time. I don't know how it is now. I wish I was down there again now to see if that changed any. But otherwise, it was nothing. To me, it was not. Now, in Missouri, I didn't have no problem with there. It wasn't that bad. But where it was bad was in Louisiana. Louisiana, yeah. It impressed me. It impressed me to see. I couldn't believe it that human beings were treated like dogs and animals. Animals. Terrible. From there, we went back to Camp Livingston, Louisiana again, and they shipped me from there to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And I said to myself, what am I doing over here now? You know, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And the guy says, we're training to engineering, what they call it, the engineering battalion. That's what they call it, engineer battalion, to go maybe overseas to where the war was finished or whatever. He said to repair the airfields or bridges, whatever it had to be. That's what you got to do. I said, okay, that's fine. So training again. I get through with that training, and they decided to check you out physically and medically to see how you're doing and all that. And like I said, in the meantime, I had the one boy that was born out of my wife and I, and she was following me around on these camps that I was being transferred all the time. And in Fort Leonard Wood, they couldn't find no places for her to stay. So she was back in Denver with the boy, about a year and a half old by then, maybe 2 years old. And I went to the doctor at the hospital for the medical checkup, and he's a captain, and pretty soon he says to me, he says, I see by your record over here, he said that you are from Denver, Colorado. I say, yes, sir. He says, you know, I love Colorado. I've been there, he says, almost for 20 years. Every summer I go out in Colorado for my vacations. And he liked me so much by telling me that, you know. And he says, but I see, he said, they're going to try to send you to Japan on a army of occupation. I said, that's right. And also I see over here, he says, you're married. You got a couple of years old boy over there, he says. You want to raise a family now, the war is over. He said, what the hell do they want to send you over there for? Just exactly what he said, you know. And I said, well, he said, what would you like to do? And so first of all, I said, before I go any further, I like to have my wife here, you know. And he said, why? Because I said, I can't find a place to stay over here. He said, do you think she'd find a place at home for you? I said, you talking about that I go home? You know, just on a trip or something? I said, no. He said, let the young guys, he said, they're not married or nothing, let them go to Army of Occupation in Japan. He said, you're going back to your wife, he said, in Denver, Colorado. I got a medical discharge. So I ended up with 10% disability because of my feet. And I've been still collecting the money of disability since I got discharged. And that was in September and October 1945. And that's as far as I got, as far as the war is concerned. I didn't have to go overseas, thank God in a way. But then now I can tell you that my dad died in the meantime, in 1945 in Italy, so I never got to see him anymore. Then my mother regained her citizenship because my dad died. Remember, she had lost it. And I called him from here, so my whole family came in 1948. I finally got them all over here. And we've been all together here ever since, except that my mother died at about 10 years ago now. And she was 93 years old. And I lost a sister about Christmas time last year. Otherwise, everything else. And now I've been in personal business. I was in bar business. I own a company of installation and service of filling station equipment. I worked on that company for 25 years. I retired. I've been here now, raised 5 children, 10 grandchildren, and 7 great-grandchildren. And I've been very active in the community of Denver. I've been awarded several awards. I got a whole room full of awards in there. And I'm very happy. 87 years old. I still go bowling once a week. Now that we finished last week for the summer, I'll rest for a while.
What were some of the awards for?
One of them was the #1 Italian man of Denver. One of them. And one of my, the very first award I got it from the American Legion way back in, I joined the American Legion after I got out. And they awarded me something, I got the award in there. Then I got it for being president of different clubs that I belong to. I founded some of the groups of Italian groups that we have in Denver now. I was a charter member of the Sons of Italy in Denver, you know. I was a founder of a Italian-American organizations of Colorado. I was one of the founders. And then I was the president. I served for several years. And after I gave up my job, so Philip Antonelli, after I finished serving as president of the Federation of Italian-American Organization of Colorado, he became the president. So that's why him and but I met him through the Sons of Italy before, years before. But him and I, we've been very, very good friends for many years. Yeah. And Romana too, you know, his wife, very good friend in fact, my wife, she baptized one of her children.
We were going to ask you a little bit about what is really going on here with Columbus Day and the Sons of Italy, and do you really want to comment on this?
That's what I just got to say. Why people can see it to be nice and forget about things, and not to bring up things that causes war. That's what they are. You know what I mean? The confrontations, and that's what they are. Because of that, to me, see, that's what I say. When I was the president of the Italian Federation, that's when we had the 3 years of parades. I was Columbus, dressed as Columbus, on one of the floats. You know, my wife was Queen Elizabeth. Oh yeah. Oh no. Then I did it 2 years. The third year, I couldn't go and do that. Why? There was a word out they were going to kill Columbus. Somebody had the gun, they were going to kill Columbus. the policeman gave me a bulletproof vest. I says, bulletproof vest don't stop people from killing me. My head is still open. So I'm not going to be Columbus this year. Forget it. And that was the last year we had the parade until we start getting the parade again now, you know. But that's here, these few Indian, especially this one guy that he's a president of the Ames Club, American Indian Movement or something. It drives me nuts. He just wants his name on a paper and on TV. That's all he does. He doesn't care what happens. And you know, it could turn out to be a bad deal sometime. But knock on wood, nothing ever happened on every one of the parades so far.
Well, it's something that's hard to
You know,
understand at all.
What happened 500, 600 years ago, you know what I mean, to Columbus? It wasn't him that did it. And why blame the one man? The Indian himself killed himself by the thousands. They died from gonorrhea and everything else. They said he know how to take care of himself. But then now they're blaming one man because all these people died. And this guy that's doing all the talking is not even a full-time Indian. You can't believe how terrible wars are. That's why I hate wars now. I just the thought of war. I hate to see these boys in Iraq getting killed over there now, you know. Even though it's not a big war, but it's still a war, you know what I mean? But that's terrible. I feel real bad about that. Like I said, I hope that someday people with their good mind can figure out why do that. There's no reason for it to be. I don't see any reason for it. At the end, everybody loses. There's no winners, big shots, or anything like that. But they just can't help it. You just can't help it.